because we're really talking about ways that you can reach the Common Core, or the, as you folks call it, the Massachusetts Frameworks for Literacy and Language Arts. Framework, oh yeah, it's frameworks, but the Common Core. And one of the big challenges and one of the big push is really, how do we get kids to read for and write with evidence? And it's something we've all done as teachers ahead of time, and we've all thought about it. But we're really trying to push greater analytical reading. And I know some have called for, I'm not going to get the whole, there's no pre-reading debate, or prior knowledge doesn't matter. I'm not going to avoid that. What I do know is I can just speak without it. I can speak loud.
You're fine where you are. I can't find yours.
Okay.
Podium mic. It's muted.
No, not under Keynote. It's under New Literacy Resources. Wednesday Keynote. So the goal is, how can we, and that's not something we can really, that nobody can really argue with. We want our students to read for and write with evidence. So how can we use digital text and tools to do that? And there is no way. And I think that's part of it. I hear it all the time that the metaphor that we need to have in our schools is, oh, we need to be more like medicine. Oh, our teachers training needs to be more like doctors. I disagree, because we're trying to create a model where in medicine, there's only one outcome. You're either dead or you're not. You either get better or you don't. And so we're trying to apply that kind of dichotomy into schools while also using stats that are made from farms. Like most of the statistics that people use, that was like, if I apply fertilizer to plot A and none to plot B, does plot A grow more? Well, you know what? It doesn't work in schools because there's certain things. There's teachers, there's kids that I have breakfast. You know what those are called? Nuisance variables. Teachers and kids, they get in the way of statistical modeling. They're nuisances. So how do you deal with those kinds of classrooms? You can't go with the medical model of just best, I got cured, or bad, I died. It's not a good metaphor. I don't like that metaphor. The metaphor I prefer is, instead of trying to strive for best practices, because there's only best. You can't get better than best. It's like silver, the Olympics. Silver's just really the first loser. I mean, you can't get better than best. So I prefer better practices. And this is something I take from Dave Rankin, who's chair of our president of the Literacy Research Association, that we should encourage our teachers to strive for better practices every time. Because there is no one answer. What works in your classroom as better practice may not work the same in a different school. And yes, research can inform our better practices. Like, for example, I love looking at the Writing Next report, which outlines 11 strategies to improving writing. Those 11 strategies can make our practices better. I don't think you can ever make a practice best. There is no best in teaching, because what you should really be striving to do, my metaphor that I like, is instead of saying, oh, we need to be more like a medical model, let's be more like engineers. Let's try to make schools better. Let's have a blueprint. And that's what the Common Core does for us. It's a phenomenal blueprint, especially the anchor standards. The grade level standards, they can get a little wishy-washy. But when you read through the college career readiness anchor standards, I don't see any of those and be like, well, no, I really don't want my kids doing that. They're a good, solid goal. So what can you do to be an engineer? Well, engineers make things better. They have the blueprint and are constantly tweaking to build things better. So we need to engineer better students. We need to engineer better teachers. And to do that, we have to think about technology this way. Does it enhance my pedagogical goal, or does it inhibit my pedagogical goal? Like, for example, when they first invited me to this keynote, I was like, oh, I'm going to take that. Anybody familiar with like the Foursquare model for vocabulary? Yeah. I was like, I'm going to make this cool project where kids use QR codes, and it links out to another website that there's one for the definition, and we'll have a QR code that goes to a picture of what it's not. And I thought to myself, that would eat up so much instructional time. And if my goal is to improve academic vocabulary, that would actually inhibit my pedagogical goal. Because I'd be wasting instructional time teaching the kids how to do a QR code and then having them make the drawings. Well, you know what? They could just have a few worksheets or a program and do 10 words in the amount of time they could do it. So that was a bad idea. I would be engineering a disaster. So that's what I kind of look at. What can we think about when we say enhance our pedagogical goal? And that's how we can deal with the noise. Because I love my little nuisances. They're so much fun. That's why we teach. And that's what we're trying to improve in our classroom, with each classroom being different. So what can we do to use digital text and tools in our classroom? Well, the Common Core outlines three things. Well, it talks about online research and media skills. That's how I look at new literacies, and that's the language I'm going to be using for that, online research and media skills. But when I look at strand 10, text complexity, and they talk about, just giving that single text over time, that's good. But to me, that also misses the key component of what it means to read in today's digital world. To me, the most complex text is a socially complex text. And I define that as concurrent arguments that develop in both print and social media with varying degrees of authority and amplification. What do I mean by that? Well, it's election year right now. The whole idea of the text being a single source is impossible. And if there's different degrees of amplification, that means I have 50% of the country saying, no, this text is right, and 50% of the country saying, no, this text is right. So there's different degrees of amplification. There's also different degrees of authority. If who should I really be listening to about this text? And they fake authority. Last weekend, in politics, we were talking about it, I think in one of the sessions I mentioned this, Mitt Romney picked up 28,000 Twitter followers in a day. Thing is, they had 3 pictures, all 28,000 people. They were just the same guy. It was a robot. So authority is being amplified. And trust me, that Romney Land's doing nothing different than the Obama camp's doing. They just are using that data to figure out what you drink, what you eat, and they know everything about you. That's their goal for that. So that's what I mean by socially complex text, concurrent arguments. And to me, that's the most kind of complex text out there. And we do need to focus on deep and close analytical reading of single sources. But if we ignore that, there's no way that we're teaching online reading and media skills. Because text today, for me, they're multimodal. They involve different sounds and images and text. One of the experiments I did with kids is we took a topic. I think it was a gentleman on death row, and we looked at a Wikipedia article, and he was appealing, and an article against and an article for. The amount of colors, the ones that said, this man's guilty, he needs the death penalty. They used a lot of reds and dark bolds, and then the ones that talked about the innocence and the travesty suddenly saw pastels and. So this elements of design, this multimodal design, that's a new form of writing. And texts are also multiple sources. There is no reading one source anymore. Well, unless you watch a kid read online, then they only read the last thing they find. But for effective readers, there are multiple sources. And finally, they involve multiple perspectives. There's many voices in all the text that we do. And those perspectives shape how we look at a text. And they shape the truths. It's how the words and images that we use on a page are influenced by what we do. So what can we do? Well, my thing is, we all know metacognition, right? What's metacognition? Thinking about thinking. To me, and that says metacognition's in my head. It's an individual thing. If I can just think about how I read, then I'll be a better reader. And that's true. But I look at metacognition more as a social practice. It's about encouraging strategy exchange. Because I have no idea what reading is going to look like tomorrow. I don't. It's going to be different. But if I can talk to him, and he's like, look what this idea that I just picked up. So to me, metacognition is a social activity, not just an individual reflective activity. It involves a group of people. And we can use that strategy exchange, and we can use digital text and tools to increase how well we teach and measure knowledge growth. Specifically looking at how we use and read with and write for evidence. How do we do that? By looking at that digital footprint and seeing how knowledge gains grow through process and not product. And that's what I'm here today to do. I want to highlight different tools that this talented team has put together to show you ways that you can use them to increase the efficacy and efficiency of how you look at knowledge growth. So, with that focus on text-dependent questions. I have my own little take on them. I'm not going to, my favorite line in the Common Core, it's right in the overview. The Common Core is about what to teach, not how to teach. So don't listen to anybody who says you have to do it a certain way. And with that being said, I'm now going to tell you how you have to do it. This is how I look at asking text as part of improving comprehension. Do not ask students to read this, simply answer questions. You know, how have we done comprehension poorly in the past? Well, if you can't read it again and read it out loud. And if that doesn't work, try reading it loud. It's not going to improve the comprehension. So what you need to do is give students concrete tasks to support comprehension, and then include the right amount of guidance through those tasks. And that's what is being lost, I think, in the debate over, oh, is it pre-reading or that? It's not that closed reading has zero guidance. It's that the guidance has to be based in evidence and has to be individualized for each student. So what I did is I looked at you can Google this. I think it's from achievable.org. It's the Guide to Writing Analytical Questions. And I'm going to take each of their bullet points and show you how you can use digital text and tools to work on that. So let's look at the first two. Analyze paragraphs on a sentence-by-sentence basis and sentences on a word-by-word basis to determine the role played by individual paragraphs, sentences, phrases, or words. Investigate how meaning can be altered by changing key words and why an author may choose one word or another. Those are good activities that support analytical reading. So what can I do to do that? Well, luckily this team, they're spread out now, are showing some awesome tools. You can use Evernote, Google Forms, Socrative, and you annotate to really look at words at a word-by-word level. For example, I'm doing a session on and you annotate, and I like it because I encourage my kids to maybe highlight or all pick one paragraph for them. And I will download an article. This is from Science News Articles for Kids. And I'll put 2 text-dependent questions at the bottom, but let them know all the information that I want you to use is right in that paragraph. We're going to focus on the meaning of the words in just one paragraph. So what clues does the author give you that the tooth being found in Southeast Asia was a puzzle? Can they answer that with telling me their story about when they went on a trip to Africa? Are they making a text-to-word connection about it? No, they have to use the evidence from the text. And that's the key. Why does the author compare the 18,000-year-old tooth with million-year-old skeletons in Africa? What role does the phrase human ancestor play in the paragraph? There you see me. I'm focusing on just a word in my question. But the beautiful thing is now, really, what am I doing but digitizing a worksheet? And I'm not gonna get up here and say worksheets are bad, because it's some things require direct instruction, and I'm okay with that. Especially when I think about reading comprehension. You explicitly define something, you model that skill, you provide some direct instruction, you provide some chances for guided practice and some chances for independent practice. We know that works. Here's an example of students actually taking a science text, and I assess how they annotate it. So you can see a TR next to the overview. They had to put those they had to mark headings right there. I use different colors. They had to highlight when words were definitions and conclusions. I can't do that with a textbook. I just can't. I can do that with digital text and tools. Even if you don't have crazy computers. How many people read high school teachers in here? Do we read like Shakespeare or John Locke, or I mean, do you read some old stuff by a lot of dead white guys? Well, guess what? Those books are all free. You go to the Gutenberg Project, you can download that book in either HTML or PDF. So, and then your students can make their own Cliff Notes, their own Spark Notes. They're going to go there anyway. So why not say, I want you to annotate the text, and I want you to make study guides for each other. And you know what? You don't have to go out and you don't have to be buying new copies of Romeo and Juliet anymore. You're just downloading them for free. But the beautiful thing is, this, I mean, if I teach college, if I had kids come in doing this, I'd be so happy. This to me is college career ready right there. And you, as teachers, say you did that in September, did that again in December, and then again in May. You can handle, I mean, how hard is it? Well, how many times did they define a word? How many very quick, informative data? Not formative, informative. But you can look at growth in knowledge by seeing how they did that. Another example from my math, yes ma'am? It does, but you can do the same thing in PDF Reader. They have annotation built in it. I don't know if there is an Android app or a phone app, so I don't want to say only for iPads. But you can do the same activity using Adobe Reader, which the comments are just little comment boxes. You can do the same thing in Microsoft Word if you've downloaded the book. You just use the highlight feature and the comment boxes. So the tool it's not tool dependent, it's pedagogically dependent. And that's the important key point. Here's another picture for I know there was a big math contingency that I was looking at this. You can set up sheets like this. We talked about outside. Your group, you're talking about different ways to highlight math. And we're saying that, you know what, when kids, to get points back in the quiz, maybe they have to come up on their Mimeo boards, redo the problems they got wrong, and do a think aloud in math. Because I was I can say luckily or cursed, I was both a language arts and a math teacher when I was in school. And nothing drive me more insane when they said, oh, well, you need to have literacy in every classroom. And so math, you have to do something. And that's just running into reading circumference of the pie for the 14,000th time. That's not what content area literacy means for a math teacher. I don't want to read a biography of Tesla. I do want to read a biography of Tesla, but that's just an authority. But what I support, where I see content area literacy in math class is through supporting numeracy. How do I use data to make bar games? That's not an example of that, but I just had to get on that soapbox because I hate when it's like, oh, we need more content area reading math, so go read this book about math. That's not what it's for. Here's an example from a science classroom. The teacher grabbed a bunch of pictures and said, you can't see it here, but basically it was about drawing the food web. So the kids went through and drew all their lines to trace a food web. Remember that one thing about, remember that thing that said, pay attention to how words affect the meaning? That was one of the goals. Well, tonight, if those that are willing to join us, we're going to be running a hack jam. And we'll talk about it right before lunch if anybody wants to come. But basically, what I did is you can flip the meaning of a website by changing the code. There's this tool called Google Goggles. It's free. It's a plugin for Firefox, and it reveals the code of any website. So let's read what this page. The NRA is you, its members, millions of Americans representing a diverse contrast of age, sex, race, and religion. Your patriots, one and all. We have recently committed to changing our position to responsible gun ownership. You believe in the Constitution, staunch in your defense in your rights, yet you understand that our forefathers never predicted armor-piercing bullets. Is this the NRA? They wouldn't say this. But when you're talking about supporting argumentative writing in the classroom, taking positions, like having kids flip websites. I told you I did the other one, but they changed the website so it didn't work as well. The Media Action Network, and flipped it into a love for baking website. So that's what we're going to do with the hack chain, but now we're looking at flipping individual words and seeing how it shapes an argument. Not really asking a question per se, but still using digital text and tools to focus in on argumentative writing. And how do I use evidence to make a point? And how do I use design? Jared and Mary are doing things. Jared's doing something in Google Forms. Mary's doing something in Socrative. What about coming up with different rubrics? Here's one that I took from Jared's page on doing a reading reflection. It says, personal reflections and reflections about reading, at least 3 examples of reading strategies, references to specific pages, clear and complete sentences, correct mechanics. You can do this in Google Forms for all your kids. And what you end up with, again, is it populates a spreadsheet. So you have data that can show growth, and you can look for patterns. And you might look across it real fast. I mean, there's nothing worse. The one thing that makes me want to throw open my mouth is when I hear like publishers selling me formative assessments. Because how is a formative assessment pre-planned and pre-boxed? And I don't get the data for 3 months. No, I need to know tomorrow what I need to fix. And something like this does, because I might go through and be like, wow, my students really aren't citing their evidence. I need to do some mini lessons on evidence citing. And I get that data immediately through Google Forms or Socrative. And I can change my practice. I can do this on Monday, change my practice on Tuesday. And that's formative assessment for me. That's how I define it. Using information to improve my instruction. So right there, that can be built in. And I also call it, you know what, lunch ladies everywhere, and when cafeteria workers, the gentlemen, they can decide for you. They're happy. Because you know what? They don't have to guard their milk crates with a shotgun. Because if you transfer this kind of stuff, teachers don't need to go and steal their milk crates so they can bring home crates and crates of binders and journals and everything. I call it the end of milk crate grading. That's what this is. Because everything can be done for you, and you have this. You can collect the information online. Another way that you could use Google Forms or Socrative. Anybody ever use semantic feature analysis? All right. Well, this is a great tool for learning concepts and vocabulary, especially in social studies. Basically, what you do is you come up with 3 principles. This is democratic government, population more than 100 million, centrally planned economy. And you just put a plus minus if it fits that category. It works in science. It works in social studies. You can do it in language arts. Semantic feature analysis, it's a research-based, proven way to really focus in on concept teaching. All right. So the next 2 ideas that the Guide to Analytical Writing, writing analytical questions, has is to probe each argument in persuasive text, each idea in informational text, and each key detail in literary text, and observe how these build to a whole. Examine how shifts in the direction of an argument or explanation are achieved and the impact of those shifts. Well, that's why I look one way is to re-envision the literature circle. I use literature circles for reciprocal teaching a lot in my classroom, but I have seen them devolve into absolute disaster with teachers sitting up on their desk while the kids, you have 5 kids in the group doing 5 separate worksheets. There's no discussion, there's no interaction, there's no modeling going on. So I thought, how could I use digital tools such as Edmodo and Scoop It to re-envision the literature circle? And this is what I came up with. Different roles. I give the kids a shared text. They have to read a shared text because that's part of closed reading. I want them to have a shared text experience, but I also want them to understand how to integrate and read multiple sources. So you assign a curator, and their job is to find other articles or websites or blogs on that topic. And they can build a newspaper for the group using a tool such as Scoop It or Symbaloo, which I think Beth showed a little bit of, and they can, give out those links. Then you have the editorial board. And his job is to take all that information and write an argument of investment that goes in the newspaper. And then the wordsmith, who then create a slide of the words that the reader should know. They must choose 2 words from each source that really affected the meaning of the writing. Again, that goes right back to what they said we should be doing. And the curator will then add that slideshow. Okay. And the discussion director, again, they have to ask questions. You need to have kids practice. If you want them to answer text-dependent questions, have kids practice writing text-dependent questions. Give them the opportunities to ask each other, questions that really focus in on the text. Because have you ever listened to half the discussion when you have literature in the classroom? It doesn't take long for them to go from Lord of the Flies to, oh my gosh, I rode Space Mountain once and it was just like that. It's just, they get off of the text very quickly. So you have to really push that. And the beautiful thing is about when you do a blended literature circle or an online literature circle is when I'm a teacher, I can sit with this group today, but I have no idea what those three groups are saying. If I do it this way, I still can sit with this group today, and I can help model the comprehension strategies that I'm trying to teach. But you know what? Later on, I can go online and see what this group did, that group did, and that group did. And I can look again for those patterns. And I can know what mini lessons I can teach. Like, oh wow, they really are struggling with summarizing informational text. So you know what? Tomorrow I'm going to do a quick mini lesson on summary. Again, you're using the digital text and tools to increase the efficacy and efficiency of how you measure knowledge gains. And you're taking those knowledge gains to improve your practice. Better practice. How do you enhance your pedagogical goal? Screenshot. Where is Stephanie's doing a screenshot? Here's another great way to basically have kids do their own thing aloud. You can record video now. You can give them a short passage and record their video. So when we're talking about doing running records, there's a few elementary school teachers in here. We do running records constantly. Why not record that? And then when you're done, you can highlight, put your little marks on there already. And then you have a digital copy of a video copy of that running record. So when it comes time for the parental conferences, you can show, hey, this is what I'm talking about. You're not just showing your parents a piece of paper with a bunch of carrots and some circles and some error marks written on it. They can actually listen and watch their child read. So as an example, you can also use the videos for mini lessons. Oh, wait a minute. Hold on, guys. Give me 1 second. No, it's because I had my iPad mirroring. What? It's weird. I'm hearing like 4 times. Oh. But I hear it everywhere except where it needs to be.
We don't hear anything.
Well, I'll just talk through it. I'm not going to waste time. But basically what I did is I created a how to write a book review. And you can do that by using those screen testing tools such as Screenshot or Gene, which is what Ian's doing. All right? Don't worry about it, Jim. It has something to do with my audio being different because I'm flipping back and forth. The next thing the next ideas that we're told to do is to examine how shifts in the direction of an argument or an explanation are achieved and the impact of those shifts. And note and assess patterns of writing and what they achieve. This is argumentative writing. And it is different than persuasive writing, because persuasive writing builds off of personal connections. And it builds off of, it's not evidentiary based. And we see that in the MCAS writing process. It's like, oh, you were given X number of dollars, and you can go build an amusement park in your backyard. How it works? What are you going to do? That's not based on evidence reading. It's based on prior experience, and it's about emotional pull. Does that mean that there's no such thing as persuasive techniques? No. The best writers that do argumentative writing still use a lot of persuasive techniques. You just don't realize it because it's just not as explicit. And this is the hardest thing for any writer to teach. I mean, I wish I could get it down. I think that, and that's just effective transitions. It's what kind of patterns do I build in to really make things explicit for my audience. And there's a tool that I use now to teach argumentative writing. We all use graphic organizers in our writing. And what's the first thing we have our students do when we assign an essay? Yeah, with the graphic organizer, most graphic organizers start where? The introduction, the main idea. I want to flip that process. Why are we telling our kids to take a position before they've even read any of the evidence? And why are we telling them to take a position that, yes, they might believe in, but it might be harder to write? So what I do is I use something called the V diagram. And that has students, and I put up the blanks, I think, on the website. If not, I will. The V diagram doesn't have them write their position statement until they've investigated both sides of the issue. And so what they do is, what you see here is a line, and then something under it. This something under it is a rebuttal to that point. So this is on reducing carbon emissions. Position 1, cap and trade. Position 2, carbon tax. You know, fewer complexities than cap and trade. What's the rebuttal? Will take legislators to change the rates with energy prices. Over here, provides a fixed number for carbon emissions. We know exactly how much is reduced. People will use complex loopholes and lawyers to get out of paying. So you're trying to counter their arguments. And that requires close analytical reading. So you're integrating, you're reading for, and you're writing with evidence. And then after they finish all of this, then they go look through their position statement. And then they write, well, everyone sees the T word as a curse. A carbon tax makes more sense for businesses over a cap and trade system. It is a less complex system, and the law can be written to adjust with energy prices. A firm tax lowers the chances for fraud, unlike cap and trade, and provides a clear profit incentive. I wish I could have that. But that's what we need to do when we're giving, that's argumentative writing in science. And we know, how many science teachers are there? Do I have any science teachers in here? We know that kids struggle to read and write with evidence in science. We also know that one of the best predictors of science performance are the reading comprehension skills. So we have to look for ways to support comprehension in writing in science while not losing your primary pedagogical goal of teaching content. Content equals comprehension. And that's why we're trying to get back to the text. Because we want to identify ways in which we can enhance our pedagogical goals and have our kids learn the content while learning to read, like we talked about it when I was with this group yesterday. How does the historian read differently than the scientist? And you can use all of the digital text and tools that we're showing you this way to figure out new ways to enhance your pedagogical goal. Engineer your classroom to be a better classroom. Don't strive to be the best classroom, because you can't. Strive to just be better. Wake up every day. Well, except maybe like Thursdays, because we're usually tired. But every other day. Wake up and just strive to be better. And think about every time you teach a lesson. That's why the reflective teaching practices are key to reaching the college and career readiness anchor standards. Because you have to ask yourself, how can I do better every day? And how can I look at the evidence that I am collecting to see what I need to do better? And I'm telling you, I firmly believe that that path of collecting better evidence is the path that we need to enhance our pedagogical goal. It's what we have to do to make our schools better, our children thrive. And that's where that's why you'll hear me all week long. Well, is this enhancing or inhibiting your pedagogical goal? Because there's a point to this. Let me figure out how, hopefully I can get the video to work this time.